We tend to think of history as a grand, inevitable story, marching forward in a straight line. But what if it isn't? What if our entire modern world, everything from its borders to its technology to its very population, all hangs on the thread of one person's improbable survival, centuries and centuries ago? Today, we're going to explore how one man's life didn't just alter history, it literally created the world we live in now.
Let's travel back to the year 1182. On the vast, windswept plains of the Mongolian steppe, a young man named Temujin is on the run. He's a fugitive, hunted by his enemies, abandoned by his own clan. He is starving, and he is utterly alone. His life is a whisper in the wind, and had that whisper been silenced, history as we know it would have simply and completely unraveled.
Now, to really grasp the stakes here, we need to understand a concept called historical contingency. It's the idea that history isn't some fixed destiny. It can turn on a dime, pivoting on a single unpredictable moment. So what we're doing here isn't just recounting a biography. No, it's a thought experiment. We're asking, what if, to see whether our modern world was an accident or if it was always meant to be.
Well, that hunted young man, Temujin, did survive. And he would become known to the world, of course, as Genghis Khan. To really appreciate the world that almost wasn't, we first have to understand the sheer scale of the world he actually built, and it goes so much deeper than the caricature of a simple, brutal conqueror.
You see, his impact isn't just something you measure in history books. It's something we can measure today, right now, in our own DNA. His influence is written into the human genome on a scale that is frankly hard to even comprehend.
16 million. That is the estimated number of men alive today who are direct descendants through the male line of a single ancestor who lived in Mongolia about 1,000 years ago. A groundbreaking genetic study in 2003 pointed overwhelmingly to one person, Genghis Khan. Think about that. 1 out of every 200 men on Earth carries his genetic legacy. This isn't ancient history. It is a living, breathing part of our world.
And that's the crucial point. His true genius wasn't just in winning battles. It was in organization, in administration, in innovation. While his armies were busy redrawing the map of the world, his ideas were fundamentally rewiring how entire civilizations functioned. He created a system that was nothing short of revolutionary for its time.
For starters, he completely shattered the old feudal order. He promoted his commanders based on their skill and loyalty, not their family name. A truly radical idea back then. He established a unified legal code called the Yasa, which, among many other things, guaranteed religious freedom. He also built this incredibly sophisticated intelligence network, a kind of medieval CIA. All of this laid the groundwork for what we call the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol Peace, a century of stability that connected Eurasia into one vast economic and cultural powerhouse for the first time in human history.
So what did all this stability actually do? Well, it created the safest, most efficient Silk Road that had ever existed. And because of that, things started to move. Gunpowder, the printing press, the compass, critical mathematical ideas, all of them flowed freely from east to west. And this sudden flood of new technology and knowledge helped provide the fuel for Europe's own great transformation, the Renaissance.
Now we have to be very clear, the destruction was immense, and it was brutal. By some estimates, the Mongols were responsible for the deaths of 11% of the entire world's population. It's a staggering toll. And yet, here's the paradox. That same wave of violence shattered old isolated civilizations and forced them into a new global conversation. He was, at the same time, a force of total annihilation and unprecedented connection.
Okay, now for the truly fascinating part. Let's step into an alternate timeline. Imagine it's 1182 again, and that arrow, that moment of misfortune, finds its mark. Temujin dies. The Mongol Empire is never born. What does that world even look like?
Well, in our world, the Mongol invasion was a catastrophe for the Islamic Golden Age. In 1258, they sacked Baghdad and utterly destroyed the House of Wisdom, one of the greatest centers of learning the world had ever known. In a world without the Khan, Baghdad survives. Does that mean we get centuries more of scientific progress? Maybe. But some historians argue that the Golden Age was already in decline from within and might have faded on its own. It's a difficult question.
Then you have China. The Song dynasty was arguably the most advanced civilization on Earth at the time. They had paper money, gunpowder, an incredible navy. The Mongols conquered them. Without that invasion, maybe the Song dynasty begins an age of global exploration centuries before Europe. But then again, without that existential Mongol threat, perhaps their military innovation slows, leaving them vulnerable to someone else down the line.
For Europe, the consequences are just profound. The Black Death, which killed up to half the population, it traveled along the very trade routes the Mongols had secured. Without them, maybe the plague's arrival is slowed or even prevented. The system of feudalism would have likely lasted much, much longer. And without that vital injection of Eastern ideas and technology, Europe's scientific revolution and its Renaissance, they might have been delayed for centuries.
And what about Russia? The 2 centuries of Mongol rule, known as the Tatar yoke, had a defining impact. It crushed the power of all the squabbling local princes and centralized authority in one city, Moscow. This created the very tradition of strong, autocratic rule that has defined Russia for its entire history. Without the Mongols, that region probably would have just remained a collection of feuding states. The Russia we know today might never have existed at all.
So, looking at these alternate timelines, you see a world that is less connected, maybe less violent in certain ways, but also far less dynamic. And all of this leads to a much deeper, more philosophical question. Was Genghis Khan a unique individual who bent history to his will, or was he just a product of his time?
This is really the classic debate. On one hand, you have the great man theory, which says that history is really just the story of exceptional people, heroes and visionaries who drive change. But on the other hand, you have thinkers who argue that it's the big structural forces, economics, climate, social trends, that really shape events, and individuals are just playing the part that history wrote for them.
So where does the Khan fit into all this? Well, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. The conditions on the steppe, things like climate change and political chaos, made the rise of some kind of unifier very likely. It was probably inevitable that someone would unite the tribes. But the specific way it was done, the radical meritocracy, the legal code, the global vision, that was not inevitable. That was all Temujin.
And this brings us right back to our core idea, which has a name: path dependency. It's the theory that a small event, early on, can lock history onto a specific path, and the consequences just cascade and get bigger and bigger over time. The survival of that one hunted teenager back in 1182, it was one of those moments. It set our entire world on a new and completely irreversible course.
We've seen the world he made, and we've imagined the one that could have been. So how do we judge a figure like this? What is the final verdict on his legacy?
Perhaps the best way to think about Genghis Khan isn't as a hero or a villain. It's too simple. He was a historical catalyst. He was like a force of nature that took the slow, creeping process of change and globalization and violently compressed it into just a few decades. He didn't invent the modern world, but he dramatically and brutally accelerated its birth.
And that, I think, is the key takeaway. It's a sense of humility about our own time. Our modern, interconnected world, it isn't the result of some neat, predictable plan. It rests on a foundation of almost unimaginable violence, of pure chance, and of the astonishingly improbable survival of one man on the Mongolian steppe. And so, that brings us to one last, difficult question. And I'll leave this one with you. If you had the power to go back in time to make sure that arrow found its mark, and to erase his entire legacy, both the creation and the destruction, would you do it? Would you trade our messy, turbulent, connected world for one that might have been quieter, but also far more disconnected? The answer, you'll find, is not nearly as simple as it seems.